So even when you are evaluating a student for a prize in science, you are asked to do what else you contributed. So very few countries do. So what else you contributed? Have you been part of any leadership? Education is imparted in a comprehensive way, no matter whether you are a medical student or an engineering student or an history student or a political science student. You need to have one course of creative writing and one course in history. I never knew anything about constitution but for preamble in India. I was never taught. Whereas here every student is at least in the first year of 4-year degree program, they have to mandatorily improve their education skills by not only focusing on the core subject but on things that will help them to be a citizen leaders. Democracy is nothing but shared governance. It allows people to think and then express right from school age. So how do we build that given the limitations of time? How we do it in the United States? Every country does it better these days. Things are changing. Given what we have witnessed in India with about over 60% of the eligible voters participating in their exercise of fundamental rights is something to cherish. Roughly, United States has been having a percentage of 58 to 64% on presidential elections. We have two types of election, midterm elections and presidential elections. Presidential elections carry the win. So even in presidential elections, we go towards 70%. India is also reaching 60%. So that's one thing which we need to celebrate. Having said that, what is democracy? So I read. So reading is part of an important aspects of being a good citizen in a democratic world. Democracy must be something more than two wolves and sheep voting on what to have for dinner. It's not my comment. It's the comment of a very famous American author, James Bovard. He says it's what is democracy? So you have to contribute. It's not simply I go, I exercise my franchise, I get this, I voted for X and Y. So that's not democracy, because in United States, democracy was the people interested in democracy was coming down. So liberal thinkers and writers were really perplexed, and they said, okay, it's not that you go, it's held on November 2nd Tuesday. So the date is fixed, one nation and all the things. So different ideologies. Let's not go there. So it's not that I go there. There's no public holiday in United States. It's part of the duty. So you have to take it as your duty to go and stamp to the candidates, whoever you want. So don't just go and say, I voted. We get the sticker, I voted. So it's not the debate between two wolves and a sheep debating what are they going to eat that night. So it has to have some value. In other words, that passion should be there, and United States has done its thing in a way. So the entire system, whether it is a local school governance, to your election of a representative to your late legislative councils, or to the national level politics, it's all from bottom up. So they take it for granted, whereas some countries which have the highest voting percentages like Uruguay and South African countries, one has to teach. So there is things become complacency and the need. So we have to discuss these two, and universities play an important role. So democracy is not simply voting. I think Dr. Gopakumar and Professor Varghese brought that it is about sharing. So in United States, we give more emphasis to what is called a shared governance. So from the university point of view, universities have to be run on shared governance system, where students have not that utmost level of responsibility, but some level of responsibility in evaluating how teachers teach, because I pay, so I need to get something back. So that kind of a shared governance is brought into them right from undergraduate days. And these days, we are encouraging such kind of shared governance activities right from middle schools. So I was brought up in a middle class background, particularly educated oriented background, mother being a math teacher, father being an accountant, granddad being a lawyer. Even listening to cinema music is kind of considered to be a black. If you listen to cinema music, you are a black mole, and let alone talk about politics. So that is the thing, but that is slowly changing. So I was a product of 1970s. So we know, I don't know, I now know much about the emergency. In those days, I didn't know. So the lot of aura has been on politics, but politics is not considered to be being a politician or being a contributor to the society is not considered to be a black mole, particularly in developed nation, because the concept is there for shared governance. Even in your city council meetings, everything is held publicly. So the transparency, shared governance, expression of views, all these play a part, and the universities play a very good role in doing this. So even in terms of promotions, in Indian system, when I used to be there, it used to be by a committee of people, 4 or 5 people, eminent people doing it. But that's not the case in United States. It has its plus and minus. You have to get the buy-in for the entire community. If you are in the Department of History and the History Department has 20 permanent members or tenured members, everybody have a share to pitch in their feedback and comments about that particular. Of course, we expect that to be professional in a secret way, that you don't know the name who voted for you or who criticized you or who encouraged you, but all these are shared. So the students, right from how they evaluate every term, professors are evaluated even with critical comments, and that becomes part of your improvement, and that also tells empowers the student. That's very important. Of course, we have to give credit to universities, particularly Kerala being a forefront in India in all this empowerment at the grassroots level. I went to a technical education school, top-notch school, where even sports is considered secondary. So that kind of an overall holistic approach. So the importance of shared governance is built in from middle schools. High school students, they don't get judged just by their GPA or their by credits. Their holistic evaluation is the most important way where people get into Yale or Princeton or Rice, whatever these Ivy Leagues are. So that is very important. So the system itself supports the students to have a voice. The system itself supports them to have a contribution in the shared governance. So this has been since World War II, particularly during the 1960s. The concept of universities being a citadel, being a place where you shape the next generation leaders. Now the terminology is surfacing what is called as global citizen leaders. So you are not only training next generation workforce, you are training global citizen leaders. And this all started in big league schools such as University of California system under the leadership of their president by gentleman Professor Clark Kerr. And he said, a university is nothing but a prime instrument of national purpose. This was 60 years back in 1963 in one of his famous lectures he delivered in Harvard, and that became a big kind of a guidebook for universities. So right from the middle school levels, right from the undergrad levels, all the way up to getting doctoral degrees, what is your contribution? So even when you are evaluating a student for a prize in science, you are asked to do what else you contributed. So very few countries do. So what else you contributed? Have you been part of any leadership position? So weightage is given to student government association activities. So I learned all this not on one day, and I was the first Indian American to be elected in the 100 years of Texas Tech University to be a faculty senate president from a science background. So first one. So I knew that how the system works. It doesn't matter whether you are a science professor or a history professor or an engineering professor. The system itself is a comprehensive university system. So the education is imparted in a comprehensive way, no matter whether you are a medical student or an engineering student or an history student or a political science student, you need to have one course of creative writing and one course in history, which Professor Sridhar alluded to. I never knew anything about constitution but for preamble in India. I was never taught. Whereas here, every student is at least in the first year of 4-year degree program. They have to mandatorily improve their education skills by not only focusing on the core subject, but on things that will help them to be a citizen leader. So that is democracy, which we have seen from James Bovard quote here. So higher education system is nimble. So whereas there are constraints in other countries, but I think the new education policy is attempting to do that in India. So democracy is nothing but shared governance. It allows people to think and then express right from school age. That is very important. So I'm not saying that, I'm not here preaching, to admit, but Indian system, basic system,
Yes.
had
Professor
this.
Ramkumar,
So
could you just
I conclude that democracy is the way to go, and importantly, we have to give opportunity to share views either way. And I end again with a quote from Clark Kerr. If possible, I suggest people to read the book by Clark Kerr, 1963, his lectures in Harvard. Higher education has been very resilient in turning fears into triumph. So the education system should turn fears into triumph, and that will come once you give opportunities for students to engage at all levels. Communication is a must. Thank you.